After my son stopped by saying he needed to check my old car to make sure it was safe, I found a tracker hidden under the vehicle. Instead of asking him, I quietly took it off and attached it to a long-haul truck headed for Canada. 12 hours later, I got a call, and it terrified me. Before I tell you what happened next, please like and subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments where you are listening to my story of revenge. I want to know how far this story has traveled. My name is Garrison Ford, and I am 70 years old. I live in Detroit, a city that chews you up and spits you out if you show a single moment of weakness. For 30 years, I worked military logistics, moving everything from MREs to surface to air missiles across hostile borders. I know how to spot a shipment that is not right, and I know how to spot a liar. The liar in question, standing in my driveway at 7 in the morning, was my son Brandon. He leaned against the doorframe of my garage, looking like $1,000,000, but smelling like fear. He wore a tailored Italian suit that cost more than my monthly pension, but his eyes were darting around the yard like a squirrel trapped in a cage. "Dad, you really need to let me check the brake lines on the Mustang," Brandon said, his voice too high, too fast. He wiped sweat from his forehead, even though it was a crisp 40 degrees out. "That old thing is a death trap. I saw a recall notice online for the '69 models. It is dangerous." I stood there holding my coffee mug, black, no sugar, full, watching him perform. This was a 1969 Ford Mustang Mach 1, my pride and joy. I spent more time under that car than I did sleeping. I knew every bolt, every washer, every inch of rust that I had sandblasted away. Myself, if there was a recall, I would have known about it 20 years ago. But I did not say that. I just took a sip of coffee and let the silence stretch. The best way to get a liar to trip is to give them too much room to run. "You are up early, Brandon," I said, my voice gravelly from decades of shouting over diesel engines. "Usually you do not crawl out of your penthouse until noon. Is the real estate market crashing? Or did you just miss your old man?" Brandon forced a laugh. It sounded like glass breaking on pavement. "Come on, Dad, I am just worried about you. You are 70. Your reflexes are not what they used to be, and driving this beast is a risk. Vanessa and I were talking, and we just want you safe. Let me just slide under there and check the lines. It will take 5 minutes." He was pushing too hard. In my line of work, when someone insists on inspecting your cargo, it usually means they want to plant something or steal something. Brandon was not a mechanic. He could not tell a brake line from a fuel line. He was a soft-handed real estate broker who had never changed a tire in his life. But I saw the desperation in his eyes, the way his hand tapped a nervous rhythm against his thigh. He was in trouble, deep trouble, and he needed access to my car to fix it. "Fine," I said, stepping aside. "If it makes you sleep better at night, knock yourself out. The creeper is in the corner. Do not get grease on that suit." "Thank you, Dad. You are doing the right thing," Brandon said, exhaling a breath that smelled of stale scotch and mints. He grabbed the mechanic creeper and slid under the rear of the Mustang with a speed that was almost frantic. I leaned against my workbench, watching his expensive leather shoes sticking out from under the bumper. He was not checking the brakes. The brakes are near the wheels. He was fumbling around near the rear axle right above the fuel tank. I heard the metallic click of something attaching to the frame. It was a sound I recognized, a magnet snapping onto steel. "All good down here?" Brandon shouted, his voice echoing from under the chassis. "Just a loose clamp." I tightened it up. "You are good to go." He slid out, dusting off his jacket with shaking hands. He did not look at me. He looked at the car like it was a life raft, and he was drowning. "Great, thanks for the help," I said, keeping my face blank. "I have to run, Dad." "Big meeting. Vanessa sends her love," Brandon said, already walking toward his leased BMW. He did not even stay for coffee. He peeled out of my driveway, leaving tire marks on the pavement. I watched him go, my eyes narrowing. He was not worried about my safety. He was worried about where this car was going, and now I had to find out why. As soon as his taillights disappeared around the corner, I locked the garage door. I grabbed a flashlight and the creeper. My joints popped as I lowered myself down. Getting old is a battle, but I am winning the war for now. I slid under the Mustang, shining the beam exactly where Brandon had been fumbling. There it was, a black rectangular box about the size of a deck of cards tucked up high inside the rear wheel well. It was not a cheap consumer tag you buy at an electronics store. This was professional gear, a heavy-duty GPS tracker with a magnetic case and a battery pack designed for long-haul surveillance. I had seen similar tech in the service used to track convoys through the desert. I pulled it off with a solid tug. It felt heavy in my hand, cold and malicious. My own son was tracking me. Why I drove this car to the grocery store, the hardware store, and the VFW hall twice a week. My life was as exciting as watching paint dry unless you were looking for something else. Unless the car itself was the target. I sat up on the creeper holding the black box, looking at the blinking red LED light. Anger flared in my chest, hot and sharp. I had bailed Brandon out of gambling debts in Vegas 10 years ago. I had paid for his rehab when he got hooked on pills 5 years ago. I had even given him the down payment for his first condo, which I knew he had refinanced to buy cryptocurrency that crashed. I had been his safety net, his bank, and his cleaner. But this was different. This was a violation. He was not tracking me for my safety. He was tracking me because he needed to know exactly where this car was every second of the day, which meant the car was part of something bigger, something dangerous. I stood up and walked to my workbench. I grabbed a hammer thinking I should smash it into 1,000 pieces, but my training kicked in. Destroying the device would alert him. The signal would die and he would know I found it. No. I needed to feed him disinformation. I needed to send the signal somewhere else, somewhere far away, to buy me time to figure out what game he was playing. A horn honked outside my garage. 2 short blasts followed by the hiss of air brakes. I smiled. It was Clyde. Clyde was an old friend from the service, a man made of gristle and bad attitude who drove a long-haul rig cross-country. He stopped by every Tuesday on his way north to grab the specialty tools I sharpened for him. I opened the garage door. Clyde climbed down from the cab of his massive 18-wheeler, a cigar unlit in the corner of his mouth. He looked like a bear that had learned to drive morning. "Garrison, you got my torque wrench ready," Clyde grunted. "Better than new," I said, handing him the tool wrapped in an oilcloth. "Hey Clyde, where is the run taking you today? Montreal? Crossing the bridge in about an hour. Then straight." "Shot north," Clyde said, inspecting the wrench. "Why you want to come along, run away from retirement?" "Not today," I said, keeping my voice casual. "But I need a favor. I found this little gadget on my driveway. Think it fell off a delivery truck. I want to see if it still works. Can you stick it on your mud flap? Let it ride with you to Canada." Clyde looked at the black box in my hand. Then he looked at me. He saw the hard look in my eyes. The look that said, "Do not ask questions, soldier." He grinned a smile that showed a gold tooth. "Fell off a delivery truck, huh? Right. You want it to come back, or is it a one-way trip one way?" I said. "Toss it in the nearest trash can once you cross the border. Consider it done." Clyde took the tracker and walked to the back of his rig. I watched him stick it onto the steel frame of the undercarriage. It blended in perfectly with the road. Grime, he climbed back into the cab, fired up the diesel engine, and blasted the horn once more. As the massive truck rumbled down the street, carrying my son, its ears toward a different country. I felt a grim satisfaction. Now let us see who panics. I went back into the house, my fortress. The silence of the empty rooms usually comforted me, but today it felt heavy, loaded with invisible threats. I went to my study, a room lined with books on military history and old maps. I sat down at my computer and opened a secure browser. Years ago, after Brandon stole my credit card information to fund a weekend in Miami, I had installed a piece of monitoring software on his phone under the guise of a battery saver app. He was tech illiterate enough to never notice it. It gave me access to his location, his call logs, and his messages. I rarely checked it, respecting his privacy as an adult. But today, privacy was a luxury neither of us could afford. I logged in, the screen populated with data. The blue dot representing Brandon was not at his real estate office downtown. It was at a derelict warehouse district near the river. Places where deals were made that did not involve contracts or notaries. I zoomed in on the map. He was stationary. He had been there for an hour. The GPS tracker on Clyde's truck was already 10 miles away, moving steady at 60 miles per hour. Northbound. I leaned back in my leather chair, sipping my cold coffee. My mind went into tactical mode. Why would a luxury real estate agent be sitting in a rusted-out warehouse district at 8 in the morning? Why would he need to track a 70-year-old man's car? I pulled up his recent messages. Most were fluff texts to Vanessa about dinner reservations or complaints about clients. But then I saw a thread with an unsaved number. The messages were brief-coded. "Is the mule ready?" the stranger wrote. "Ready. Checking the shoes this morning." Brandon had replied, sent 30 minutes before he arrived at my house. "Shoes," I muttered. "Tires, no." My tires were new. It was code. Mule, that was a term I knew well. In logistics, a mule moves contraband. My son was using me as a mule. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. My hands clenched into fists. It wasn't just about money this time. It wasn't just gambling debts. Brandon had gotten himself involved with people who moved product, and he had volunteered his own father as the delivery system. I watched the screen. Brandon's dot started to move. He was leaving the warehouse, heading toward my house. No. He turned north. He was watching the tracker. He saw the signal moving toward the highway, toward the bridge to Canada. I could imagine his confusion, his panic. He thought I was driving. He thought I was taking the Mustang on a road trip I had never planned. He was probably calling Vanessa right now, screaming that the old man had gone rogue. I sat there for hours watching the dots move. Clyde was making good time. He would hit this border crossing by noon. Brandon's dot was erratic, driving in circles, stopping then speeding up. He was freaking out. I checked the cameras. I had installed around my property another precaution from a lifetime of being careful. I saw nothing unusual, just the mailman and a stray cat, but the feeling of being watched made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. My phone rang. It was Brandon. I let it go to voicemail. He called again and again. I ignored them all. I needed him to stew. I needed him to be terrified, because a terrified man makes mistakes, and mistakes are the only way I get the truth. Around noon, Clyde crossed the Ambassador Bridge into Canada. The tracker signal jumped, showing it was now on international soil. 10 minutes later, my landline rang. Not my cell, my landline. Only a few people had that number, Brandon, Vanessa, and the VA hospital. I picked it up and held the receiver to my ear, not saying a word. "Dad," Brandon's voice was breathless, bordering on hysterical. "Dad." "Where are you?" "I am home, son, watching the news." I said, my voice calm, steady. "Where are you?" "Home. You are home. You are not driving." Brandon sounded like he was choking. "No. The Mustang is in the garage." "I am having lunch. Why?" There was a silence on the other end. A silence so heavy it felt like it had mass. Then I heard a voice in the background, muffled but angry. It was not Vanessa, it was a man's voice, deep and rough. "He says he is home," the man growled. "Ask him about the package, Dad." "Are you sure?" Brandon asked, his voice trembling. "Are you absolutely sure the car is there?" "I am looking at the garage door right now, Brandon." "What is going on?" The line went dead. He hung up. I put the receiver down slowly. The game had changed. Brandon was not alone. He was with them, and now they knew something was wrong with the tracker. I went to the window and peeked through the blinds. The street was empty, but I knew that would not last. They would come. They had to come. If they thought the car was here, they would come to check. If they thought the car was in Canada, they would come to interrogate me. I walked to the hall closet and moved the heavy winter coats aside. Behind the false back panel was a keypad. I punched in the code. The panel clicked open, revealing a steel safe. I spun the dial. I might be 70. I might drive a vintage car and listen to talk radio. But I was never defenseless. Inside the safe was my service pistol, a Colt. 1911 cleaned and oiled, along with 3 spare magazines and a box of hollow points. I loaded the weapon, the familiar weight settling into my palm like an old friend. I tucked it into the waistband of my trousers at the small of my back, covered by my flannel shirt. Then I went to the garage. I needed to know what the shoes were. I needed to know what my son had turned me into. I jacked up the Mustang. The tires were clean. I checked the trunk. Nothing. I checked the engine block. Nothing. Then I remembered the interior, the door panels. I grabbed a screwdriver and carefully popped the clips on the driver's side door panel. It came loose with a snap. I peered inside the hollow space of the door. There, taped securely to the inner metal frame, were vacuum-sealed bags, clear plastic heavy, filled with something that glittered under the flashlight beam. Computer chips, high-grade military spec processors, thousands of them, restricted tech, contraband. That was illegal to export? I let out a low whistle. This was not drugs, this was treason. These chips were used in guidance systems in drone tech. Selling these on the black market was a federal offense that carried a life sentence. My son was not just a mule. He was smuggling restricted technology, probably to a foreign buyer in Canada. That explained the tracker. He needed to make sure I did not get pulled over or deviate from a route he likely planned to send me on. Later. I stared at the bags, feeling a wave of nausea. Brandon had sold me out. He was going to let me drive a federal prison sentence across the border while he sat back and counted his blood money. I heard a car engine outside, loud and aggressive. It was not a BMW. It sounded like a heavy SUV. I quickly snapped the door panel back into place, hiding the evidence. I lowered the car and kicked the jack aside. I walked back into the kitchen just as a heavy fist pounded on my front door. "Open up, old man," a voice shouted, a voice I did not recognize. I checked the security monitor by the fridge. A black Suburban was parked on my lawn. 2 men were on the porch wearing leather jackets and looking like they broke legs for a living. Brandon was behind them, looking pale and small. I did not open the door. Instead, I pressed the intercom button. "Get off my property," I said, my voice booming through the external speaker. "Dad, open the door, please," Brandon yelled. He sounded like he was crying. "We just need to check the car. Just let us check the car." "You are not checking anything," I said. "I called the cops. They will be here in 5 minutes." This was a bluff I had not called. The cops yet. I couldn't, not with a car full of contraband in my garage. If the police found that I would be the one in cuffs explaining why I was smuggling missile chips, I needed to handle this myself. The big man on the porch kicked the door. The wood splintered, but the steel-reinforced frame held. I had upgraded the security after the riots in the 60s. It would take a battering ram to get through that door. "He is lying," the big man grunted to Brandon. "The tracker says Canada, but the car is here. He is playing games." "Break a window," the second man said. I drew the 1911 from my back and racked the slide. The sound was loud, crisp, distinct. Even through the door they heard it. "The next sound you hear will be a .45 caliber round exiting the back of your skull," I shouted. "I am a decorated marksman, and I am on my own property, fearing for my life. Walk away or be carried away." Silence on the porch. The big man stepped back, looking at the door with new respect. Thugs are used to victims who cower. They do not know what to do with a victim who is ready to kill. "Let us go," the big man said, grabbing Brandon by the collar. "We need to regroup." They dragged my son back to the SUV. Brandon looked back at the house, his face a mask of terror. He knew what I was. He knew. I did not make idle threats. The SUV reversed, tearing up my grass, and sped away down the street. I exhaled a breath. I did not know I was holding. My hands were steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. I went back to the garage. I had to move those chips. I could not leave them in the car. But where to put them, and who were these people? My phone rang again. It was the number from the text message, the one from the warehouse. The voice was distorted, digital and deep. "You played a smart hand, Garrison," the voice said. "You sent the tracker away, you kept the merchandise, but now you have a problem. You have something that belongs to us, and we have your son." Froze. "We picked him up just now," the voice continued. "He is in the back seat crying. He says you will trade the chips for his life, is that true? Or should we just put a bullet in him and come back for the car tonight with heavier equipment?" I looked at the garage where the Mustang sat, innocent and beautiful, hiding a dirty secret. I looked at the phone. "I want proof of life," I said. "Dad! Dad, help them, they are going to kill me," Brandon screamed before the phone was snatched away. "You have 1 hour," the voice said. "Bring the car to the old steel mill on Jefferson Avenue. Come alone or your son dies." The line went dead. I stood there in my kitchen, the silence returning. But now it was a suffocating silence. I had 12 hours ago found a tracker. I had thought it was a simple invasion of privacy. Now I was holding a gun, standing on top of a federal crime scene with my son held hostage by high-tech smugglers. I looked at the clock. 1 hour, I walked to the garage and popped the trunk of the Mustang I needed to prepare. This was not going to be a negotiation. This was going to be a war. And if they thought they could take a logistics expert down on his own turf, they were about to learn a very painful lesson in history. I grabbed a crowbar, a roll of duct tape, and a flare gun from my emergency kit. "I am coming for you, son," I whispered to the empty garage. "But you and I are going to have a very long talk if we survive this." I got into the Mustang, turned the key, and the engine roared to life, a deep guttural growl that sounded like anger. I backed out of the garage and headed for Jefferson Avenue. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over Detroit. The old man was going to work. The blue dot on my computer screen flickered once, then jumped across the blue ribbon of the Detroit River. It settled firmly on the Canadian side of the map, hovering over Windsor. The timestamp read 12:04 a.m. Clyde had crossed the Ambassador Bridge. My little black magnetic passenger was now international. I sat in the dark of my study, illuminated only by the cold glow of the monitor. The house was silent, but it was the silence of a held breath. I was not looking at a map anymore. I was looking at a fuse that I had just lit. The moment that tracker breached the geofence, I knew the clock started ticking. The landline rang. It was a jarring mechanical sound in the stillness. I let it ring twice. My hand hovered over the receiver, not trembling, not hesitating, just waiting. I needed to be in the right headspace. This was not a social call. This was business. I picked up the handset and brought it to my ear. I did not say hello. I did not breathe. I just listened. "You crossed the line." The voice was different from the one in the garage earlier. It was not the rough growl of a street thug. It was smooth, processed, and synthetic. It sounded like gravel wrapped in silk, likely run through a voice modulator to strip away any identifying cadence or pitch. I did not respond. I closed my eyes and focused on the audio. I pushed past the synthetic overlay, searching for the artifacts in the background. In my years in logistics coordinating supply drops in active war zones, I learned that the background noise often tells you more than the speaker. There was a low hum, steady and rhythmic, industrial air conditioning or server fans. There were no sirens, no traffic, no casual conversation. This call was coming from a secure room, a command center likely soundproofed. This wasn't a burner phone in a car. It was a voice-over IP line routed through a dozen servers. "You violated the territorial agreement." "Garrison," the voice continued, devoid of anger, devoid of any human emotion. It was stating a fact like reading a weather report. "The asset was to remain domestic. You have moved the asset into Zone 4 that initiates a containment protocol." Zone 4. I mentally cataloged the terminology. That was not street slang. Drug dealers do not talk about containment protocols or territorial agreements. That was paramilitary talk. It was the language of private military contractors or high-level organized crime syndicates, the kind that run logistics like a Fortune 500 company. I kept my silence, letting him talk. Information flows to the vacuum. If I stayed quiet, he would fill the space. We are tracking the beacon, the voice said. You are currently stationary in Windsor. Do not think the border protects you. We have contractors in Ontario who are mobilizing as we speak. You have exactly 10 minutes to turn that vehicle around and bring the package back to the designated drop point in Detroit. If you continue north, we will designate you as a hostile combatant and we will neutralize the threat, he thought. I was in the car. He thought I was driving the Mustang through Canada right now because that is where the tracker was. He was trusting his technology over his intuition. A classic mistake of the modern enemy. I leaned forward in my chair, my mind racing. The package, he called the chips the package, and he threatened to neutralize the threat. That meant they were willing to kill to keep this shipment secret. But there was something else in his tone. A slight hesitation. A gap in his rhythm. Listen closely, the voice said, and the modulation dipped slightly, revealing a hint of a European accent, perhaps. Eastern Bloc, harsh consonants softened by the digital filter. If you do not return the package, we will liquidate the collateral. We have your son, Brandon. He is here with us. He is crying, Garrison. He is begging us to wait. But the protocol is clear, Zone 4. Breach equals liquidation of all tied assets. Liquidate assets. That was the phrase that made my blood run cold. In the military, that meant destroying equipment so it did not fall into enemy hands. In this context, it meant killing Brandon because he was a loose end. I finally spoke. My voice was low, controlled. The voice I used when I had to order an airstrike on a position that was being overrun. I am not in Canada, I said flatly. There was a pause, a beat of silence where the digital static hissed in my ear. Do not lie to me, the voice snapped, losing a fraction of its robotic cool. The tracker is active. We see you. You see a piece of plastic on a mud flap, I said. I am sitting in my study in Detroit. The car is here. The package is here. You are chasing a ghost. I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end, then a muffled sound, like a hand covering the microphone. I strained to hear through the mute. There was a faint sound in the background, a metallic clang like a heavy door closing, or a weapon being racked. I waited, counting the seconds, 1, 2, 3. The hand came off the microphone. The voice was different now, darker, more urgent. If the car is in Detroit, then you are playing a very dangerous game. You just burned your son's safety net. You sent our team north. Now we have to recall them. That costs time, that costs money, and we do not like wasting either. You are not a businessman, I said, cutting him off. I know a logistics coordinator when I hear one. You are running a dispatch board. You are watching blips on a screen. You do not know where I am. You do not know what I have. You are blind. I was baiting him. I needed him to stay on the line. I needed to know who I was dealing with. The accent, the terminology, the discipline. This was an organized cell, probably a transnational smuggling ring moving tech through the northern corridor. They operated with military precision, which meant they had a chain of command, and this guy on the phone was middle management. Prove it, the voice hissed. Start the car. I want to hear the engine. I smiled grimly. He was scrambling. He needed verification. I do not work for you, I said, and I do not take orders from a computer screen. If you want the package, you will bring my son to me, alive, unharmed, and you will do it tonight. You have no leverage. Old man, the voice was cold again. Protocol dictates that if the shipment is compromised, we cut the line. Your son is the line, then you lose the chips, I said, my voice hard as iron. I know what they are. Military-grade guidance processors. Restricted export. Burn them, and you lose millions. And your bosses, whoever they are, will not be happy about a failed delivery because of a dispatch error. Silence again. I had hit a nerve. He knew I knew. He had underestimated the old man in the vintage car. "Hold the line," the voice said. I heard a click, then silence. Not a hang-up, just a hold. I looked at the screen. The blue dot in Canada was moving again. Clyde was driving deeper into the night, taking the decoy further away. Every mile he drove was another layer of confusion for them. I used the moment to think. They had Brandon. They were sophisticated enough to use encrypted comms and GPS tracking. But they were rigid. They followed protocols. That was their weakness. They expected compliance. They expected fear. They did not expect a 70-year-old logistics veteran to hijack their tracking feed and hold their multi-million-dollar shipment hostage. The line clicked back open. "New deal," the voice said, faster this time. "We will exchange. You bring the car to the Southton rail yard on the east side, warehouse for 1 hour alone. If we see cops, we kill the boy. If we see anyone else, we kill the boy. If the chips are damaged, we kill the boy." I looked at the clock. 1 hour. The rail yard was 20 minutes away. That gave me 40 minutes to prepare. "I will be there," I said. And Garrison, the voice added a chilling human menace seeping through the digital mask. "Do not try to be a hero. Heroes die. You are just a delivery driver. Remember that." The line went dead. I hung up the phone. My hand was steady. I analyzed the call in my head. The background noise, the accent, the specific threats. They were professional, but they were reacting. They were off balance. I had forced them to change the plan, which meant they were improvising. And improvisation leads to mistakes. I stood up and walked to the window. Looking out at the dark street, I was not just a delivery driver, I was a father. And I was a man who had spent 30 years ensuring that packages arrived where they were supposed to go or were destroyed if they could not. I walked to the safe in the hallway. I took out the extra magazines for the Colt. 1911. I grabbed a tactical flashlight and a combat knife. I was not going to the rail yard to make a delivery. I was going to make a collection. I went to the garage and looked at the Mustang. The door panel was still loose, hiding the bags of chips I needed. A new plan. I could not take the chips with me. If they got the chips and Brandon, they would kill us both. I needed to separate the asset from the hostage. I grabbed a duffel bag from the shelf and filled it with old newspapers and a few bricks for weight. I taped it up tight, looking like a wrapped package. Then I opened the car door and ripped the bags of chips out from the panel. I hid them in the false bottom of my tool chest, in the corner of the garage, buried under oily rags and wrenches. I threw the dummy duffel bag into the trunk of the Mustang. I checked my watch, 35 minutes. I got into the car. The leather seat creaked, familiar and comforting. I turned the key and the engine roared, a sound that usually brought me joy, but tonight sounded like a war cry. I backed out of the driveway, the headlights cutting through the darkness. I was heading into the belly of the beast, alone, armed and outnumbered. But I had one advantage they did not know about. They thought they were fighting a scared old man. They did not know they were fighting a man who had nothing left to lose but his son. I shifted into gear and drove toward the east side, toward the rail yard, toward the voice on the phone. The terrified feeling was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. It was time to go to work. My hand was still resting on the receiver when the phone rang again, barely 5 seconds after the digital voice had clicked off. This time the ring was jagged, impatient, echoing through the empty hallway like a fire alarm in a library. I knew who it was before I even looked at the caller ID. It was the panic reaction the criminal had called the handler, and now the handler was calling the mule. I picked up the phone slowly, deliberately, letting the ring cycle 3 times. I needed to set the pace. I needed to be the anchor in the storm my son was currently drowning in. "Hello," I said. my voice dropping into the register of a confused old man, a tone I had perfected over the last few years to get out of speeding tickets and avoid aggressive sales calls. Dad, oh God. Dad. Pick up, the voice on the other end was high-pitched, shredding at the edges. It was Brandon, but it sounded like a stranger. It sounded like a man falling from a great height, grasping at air. Brandon, I said slowly, keeping the receiver a few inches from my ear to dampen his shrieking. Why are you shouting? Is everything all right with Vanessa? Forget Vanessa, Dad. Where are you exactly? The GPS says you are crossing the bridge. It says you are in Windsor. Tell me it is a glitch. Tell me you are not in Canada. He was hyperventilating. I could hear the sharp, gasping intakes of breath between words, the background noise of traffic, as if he were driving erratically. I leaned back in my leather chair, staring at the wall map of Detroit. The blue dot representing the tracker was moving deeper into Ontario, while I sat perfectly still. I am at home, son, I told you this morning. I was just going to read the paper. Why would I be in Canada? I haven't renewed my passport since your mother passed. You are lying, Brandon screamed, and the sound was so raw it almost made me break character. You are lying to me. The tracker does not lie. They called me Dad. They said the signal crossed the line. They said you went rogue. Why are you doing this to me? Do you have any idea what you have done? I let a moment of silence hang in the air, heavy and thick. I needed him to fill it. I needed him to say the words that would confirm my darkest suspicion. What tracker, Brandon? I asked, my voice hardening. Just a fraction, shedding a layer of the senile act. What are you talking about? There was a pause, a choking sound on the other end. Then the floodgates opened, fueled by sheer terror, the tag. Dad, the GPS tag under the wheel. Well, I put it there this morning when I was checking the brakes. I had to make sure you followed the route. Route, I asked, what route? I was going to the grocery store. No. You were supposed to drive the car to the drop point tonight. I had it all set up. You just had to leave the car there and walk away. That was the deal. You drive the car, you leave the keys, you walk away, and my debt is cleared. That was the deal. Dad, why did you ruin the deal? My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. The mahogany of my desk creaked under the pressure of my other hand. The picture was coming into focus, sharp and ugly. My son had not just borrowed my car, he had sold me. He had sold my safety, my freedom, and my life to clear a ledger. What debt, Brandon? I asked coldly. What is in the car? It does not matter what is in the car, Brandon, sobbed his voice, cracking into a whine that reminded me of when he was 6 years old and broke a window. But this was not a window. This was a felony. You have to turn around, Dad. You have to bring the car back right now. If you do not, they are going to come for us. They are going to come for Vanessa. They said they would liquidate the assets. Dad, I am the asset. I closed my eyes for a second, feeling the old soldier inside me rise up, pushing down the father. The father wanted to weep. The father wanted to ask where he had gone wrong. How he had raised a boy who would strap a bomb to his own dad's back just to save his own skin. But the soldier knew that sentimentality got you killed. The soldier needed intel. Who are they, Brandon? Who did you sell me to? It is the syndicate, Dad. The guys from the warehouse. I owe them $500,000. I tried to double it on the market. I leveraged the house, I leveraged everything, and it all went to zero. They were going to break my legs. Dad? They were going to hurt Vanessa. So you offered them me. I said the words tasting like ash in my mouth. You offered them your father. Vanessa said it was the only way, Brandon blurted out. And that was the final nail in the coffin, Vanessa. My daughter-in-law, the woman who smiled at me over Thanksgiving turkey while measuring my house for an estate sale. She was the architect, she said. You were old, Dad. Brandon continued his words, tumbling out in a rush of justification. He was trying to absolve himself by blaming her, by blaming my age, she said. You had lived a full life, she said. If you got caught, You would just get a slap on the wrist because of your service record and your age. She said you were the perfect mule because nobody looks twice at a pensioner in a classic car. We did not think you would get hurt. We just needed the car to get to the buyer. I felt a coldness spread through my chest, absolute and numbing. They had sat around their granite kitchen island drinking wine and discussing my expendability. They had calculated the actuarial tables of my life and decided I was worth less than $500,000. They had turned my love for them into a tactical weakness. You are quiet, Dad, say something. Brandon pleaded, why does the tracker say Canada? Because I sent it there, I said, my voice dropping the facade completely. I was no longer the confused old man. I was the logistics officer who had just rerouted the enemy's supply line. What? Brandon whispered. I found your little toy this morning, I said. I put it on a truck headed north. I am not in Canada. Brandon, I am in my study. The car is in the garage and I found the door panels. The silence on the other end was absolute. It was the silence of a man watching the guillotine blades start to fall. He knew. I knew he knew. I had found the vacuum-sealed bags, the military-grade chips, the federal prison sentence he had packed into the doorframe of my Mustang, Dad. Brandon breathed, and the word sounded like a prayer to a god he had forsaken. Dad. Please, you have to. Give them the car. You have to bring it to me. If they find out the tracker is a decoy, they will not just kill me, they will kill you. They are coming, Dad. They are tracking your phone right now. I looked at the landline in my hand. It was a secure line hardwired, but he was right. If they had his phone, they could triangulate his calls. They knew he was talking to me. They knew the tracker was a lie. They were probably already rolling. You have made a grave mistake, son, I said. My voice steady, devoid of the panic he was projecting. You tried to play a game you do not understand. You thought I was just an old man washing his car. You forgot who I was before I was your father, Dad. Stop talking like that. Just bring the car, I am begging you. I am not bringing the car, I said. I am not bringing the chips, and I am not saving you from the hole you dug. This debt is yours, Brandon. You signed the contract. No, Dad, no please. They are here. I can see the headlights. They are outside my house right now. Good, I said. Hope they knock loudly. I am going to hang up now, Brandon, and I am going to prepare my house because unlike you, I do not let people walk over me. I suggest you start running or start praying. Dad. Wait. I slammed the receiver down onto the cradle, cutting off his voice, cutting off the pleading. The echo of the slam rang through the room, final and decisive. I stood there for a moment, my hand resting on the phone, breathing in the silence of my betrayed home. My son was gone. The boy I had taught to catch a baseball, the teenager I had taught to shave the man. I had walked down the aisle, he was dead to me. He had been replaced by a stranger, a coward who would feed his own father to the wolves. To save himself, I walked to the window and looked out at the street. The streetlights were flickering on, casting long pools of amber light on the pavement. It was quiet, too quiet. The calm before the artillery barrage. I knew they were coming. Brandon had led them right to my doorstep, the voice on the phone, the digital ghost had threatened liquidation. They would check Brandon's house first, realize the car wasn't there, and then they would come to the source. They would come here to retrieve their property and eliminate the witness. I was the witness. I turned away from the window and walked toward the hall closet. The sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, mechanical clarity. I had work to do, I had a perimeter to secure, and I had a war to fight. I opened the safe and took out the 1911, checking the chamber one last time. The weight of the steel was the only thing that felt real anymore. My family was a lie. My retirement was a lie. But the gun was the truth. I moved toward the front door, engaging the heavy steel deadbolts I had installed years ago. The house was no longer a home. It was a forward operating base, and the enemy was approaching the wire. The headlights swept across my living room wall like the searchlights of a prison tower slicing through the darkness I had cultivated. I did not flinch. I had been waiting for this engagement. Since the phone clicked dead 10 minutes ago, I was positioned in the hallway just out of the line of sight from the front window, my back pressed against the cold plaster, my hand resting on the control panel I had installed 5 years ago. A black SUV rolled to a stop at the curb, engine idling with a low, menacing rumble. It was a Suburban tinted windows, no plates visible. The kind of vehicle that says, "We are not here to talk, we are here to erase." I watched the feed on my tablet, which was linked to the external cameras. 2 men stepped out. They moved with a synchronized efficiency that betrayed military or paramilitary training. They did not slam the doors. They did not look around. They moved directly toward the house, scanning the perimeter, not with curiosity, but with tactical intent. One was tall, wearing a long trench coat that concealed the shotgun I knew was there. The other was compact, stocky, carrying a heavy duffel bag, breaching tools. They thought they were approaching an old man's house. A soft target, a retirement villa filled with memories and porcelain figurines. They had no idea they were walking into a kill box. I had spent 30 years securing supply depots in places where the government did not officially exist. I knew how to harden a perimeter. I waited until they were halfway up the walk, past the point of no return, past the rose bushes I had planted for my late wife. They stepped onto the porch, and the stocky one reached for the doorbell. Now I hit the red button on the panel. The reaction was instantaneous and violent. A series of heavy metallic clangs echoed through the house as the magnetic locks disengaged, and the gravity-fed steel shutters slammed down over every window and door. The house groaned under the weight of the armor sealing itself off from the outside world. In less than 3 seconds, my home transformed from a suburban bungalow into a steel-reinforced bunker. Simultaneously, the exterior floodlights I had rigged under the eaves flared to life. 10,000 lumens of blinding white light washed over the porch, turning the night into a harsh, exposing day. On the tablet screen, I saw the 2 men recoil. The tall one threw his arm up to shield his eyes, blinded by the sudden brilliance. The stocky one dropped the duffel bag, his hand reaching instinctively inside his jacket for a weapon. I did not give them time to adjust. I grabbed the microphone for the PA system, the speakers hidden in the soffits above their heads. I pressed the talk button. My voice, amplified and distorted by the gain, boomed out into the yard, rolling over them like thunder. "You are trespassing on private property," I said, my voice flat, cold, and devoid of fear. "Drop the weapons and put your hands on your heads." The tall man recovered first. He squinted into the glare, trying to locate the camera. He pulled a suppressed pistol from his coat, not a shotgun, a professional choice for a quiet hit in a residential neighborhood, raised it, and fired 3 rounds at the front door. Ping, ping, ping. The bullets struck the reinforced steel core of the door and flattened, falling uselessly to the concrete porch. Meaningless lead, I keyed the mic again. "That is reinforced ballistic steel." "Level 4, I said calmly. "You are wasting ammunition, and you are waking the neighbors. You have made a tactical error." The stocky man grabbed the crowbar from his bag and swung it with all his might at the front window, expecting glass. He was met with the dull thud of a steel shutter. He swung again, sparks flying as metal hit metal. He was panicking. He was realizing that the intel was wrong. The old man was not a soft target. The old man was a fortress. I watched them scramble, confusion setting in. They were professionals, but professionals rely on speed and surprise. I had taken both away from them. They were exposed, illuminated, and impotent. I picked up my cell phone and dialed 911. I did not scream. I did not beg. I used the voice of a concerned citizen, a performance I had rehearsed in my head 1,000 times. "Emergency operator, where is your emergency?" the female voice asked. "My name is Garrison Ford. I am at 472 Oak Street. I have 2 armed men attempting to breach my front door. Shots have been fired. I repeat, shots have been fired. I am an elderly man living alone and I am armed. I am fearing for my life." "Are you safe, sir? Are you in a secure room? I am securing the residence now." I said, watching the screen. But they are trying to break through the windows. They have automatic weapons. Please send units immediately. I will defend myself if they breach. Stay on the line, sir. Officers are dispatched. I left the line open and set the phone down on the hallway table, letting the operator hear the metallic banging as the stocky man continued his futile assault on my windows. It was the perfect alibi. If I had to kill them, the recording would prove I was the victim under siege. It would not show the vacuum-sealed bags of contraband hidden in my garage. It would not show that I had bailed my son out of a treasonous deal. It would only show an old veteran defending his castle. I keyed the PA mic one last time. "Police are 3 minutes out," I announced. "The silent alarm was tripped when you stepped on the porch. You can leave now and explain to your boss why you failed, or you can stay and explain to the SWAT team why you are carrying suppressed weapons on American soil. Your choice." The tall man froze. He looked at his partner, then at the street. He tapped his earpiece, listening to a frequency I could not hear. He must have been monitoring the police scanners, or his handler had just screamed in his ear. "Abort," he mouthed. I read his lips on the high-definition feed. He grabbed the stocky man by the shoulder and yanked him back. They did not run. Panic is for amateurs. They moved with a swift, disciplined retreat, backing away toward the SUV while keeping their weapons trained on the house they piled into the Suburban, the tires screeching as the driver floored it, tearing away from the curb and disappearing into the night, just as the faint wail of sirens began to bleed into the air. From the distance, I let out a breath I had been holding for 5 minutes. My hands were shaking now, just a little. The adrenaline dump was hitting me hard. I leaned against the wall, feeling the cold steel of the 1911 pressed against my spine. I had won the skirmish, but the war was just starting. They knew where I was, they knew I was prepared, but they also knew I had the chips and they had my son. The police would be here in seconds. I had to play the part. I had to be the terrified senior citizen, not the logistics mastermind. I quickly went to the control panel and raised the shutters just enough to look normal, but kept the locks engaged. I dimmed the floodlights. I looked around the house. It looked normal. It looked like a home, but underneath the floorboards, inside the walls, and in my mind, the landscape had changed. I was no longer retired. I was active duty, and my mission was singular. Survive the night. Save my son and burn the people who had brought this war to my doorstep. I walked to the front door, checking the dents in the steel where the bullets had hit. They were scars, proof of contact. The blue lights of the police cruisers flashed against my living room walls, painting the room in a chaotic strobe of red and blue. I opened the door, putting the gun on the floor with the slide locked. Back hands raised, showing empty palms. "Officer," I shouted, my voice trembling with a perfectly feigned fear. "Thank God you are here. They tried to kill me." The performance began, but as the officers rushed up the walk, guns drawn, I was already calculating my next move. The police could not save Brandon. They would arrest him if they knew the truth. I had to use them to clear the area. Then I had to go dark, because the voice on the phone was not done, and neither was I. The red and blue lights of the police cruisers had barely faded from my living room walls before the silence returned. It was not a peaceful silence. It was the heavy, pressurized quiet of a submarine diving past its crush depth. The officers had taken my statement, patrolling the perimeter with flashlights that cut weak beams through the darkness. They bought the story of the terrified senior citizen hook, line, and sinker. They promised extra patrols and filed a report that would sit in a stack of paperwork until the end of time. But as their taillights disappeared down the street, I knew the real danger had not left. It was just regrouping. I did not re-engage the full lockdown protocol immediately. I left the front door unlocked, the deadbolt thrown back just enough to invite entry. I sat in the wingback chair facing the entrance, the Colt. 1911 resting heavy and cold on the mahogany coffee table right next to a coaster. It was a tableau of domesticity and violence. I checked my watch, 3 minutes since the police left. 2 minutes since I saw a shadow detach itself from the neighbor's hedge across the street and stumble toward my lawn. It was not the assassins, they were professionals. They would not come back while the scent of law enforcement was still in the air. This was the loose end, this was the liability. The front door creaked open slowly, tentatively. A hand gripped the frame, knuckles white and trembling. Brandon stepped into the light of the hallway. He looked like a man who had walked through a hurricane. His Italian suit was torn at the shoulder, the expensive fabric ruined by rough handling. His tie was gone, his collar open, exposing a neck flushed with panic and sweat. He had lost a shoe somewhere in the chaos, limping on one sock soaked with dew and mud. He saw me sitting there, and his face crumpled. It was the face of a boy who had broken a window, not a man who had trafficked military contraband. "Dad," he choked out his voice, a wet rasp. "Dad, they threw me out of the car. They said next time they would not miss," they said. He took a step toward me, arms reaching out, seeking comfort, seeking the embrace of the father who had fixed his bicycles and paid his tuition. He wanted safety. He wanted to be told that everything was going to be all right, that I would fix this like I had fixed every other mess in his life. I stood up slowly. My joints ached, but my movement was fluid, controlled. I walked toward him, closing the distance in 3 strides. Brandon's eyes widened, expecting a hug. I did not hug him. I swung my right hand in a short, sharp arc, connecting with his cheek, with a sound like a pistol crack. The slap spun him around. He stumbled, crashing into the wall, clutching his face, shock replacing the terror in his eyes. He slid down the plaster, landing in a heap on the floor, staring up at me with absolute disbelief. "You do not get to cry," I said, my voice low and devoid of warmth. "You forfeited the right to cry when you put a target on my back. Get up." He scrambled to his feet, holding his cheek, tears welling in his eyes. But he did not speak. He looked at the gun on the table, then back at me, and for the first time in his life he looked truly afraid of me. Not respectful, afraid. "Sit down." I pointed to the sofa opposite my chair. Brandon sat sinking into the cushions like he wanted the upholstery to swallow him whole. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He stared at the gun, the black steel absorbing the room's light. I sat back down and picked up the pistol. I didn't aim it at him, I just held it, checking the safety, letting him feel the weight of it in the room. "Start talking," I said. "And if you lie to me, Brandon, if you give me one single half-truth or omission, I will throw you out that front door and lock the deadbolt, and those men, they are still watching. They are waiting for you." "I didn't mean for this to happen, Dad." Brandon stammered, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. "It was supposed to be easy. Just a drive. You drive the car across the border, leave it at the parking garage near the casino, and take a bus back. I was going. You. $5,000 for the trip. I swear. $5,000. I repeated, letting the number hang in the air, insultingly low. "You sold my safety for $5,000. "What is the total debt, Brandon? How much do you owe them?" He hesitated, his eyes darting to the window. "How much?" I barked, slamming the magazine of the pistol against the table. $500,000, he whispered. The word hung there heavy and toxic. $500,000. I leveraged the business accounts. Brandon said the words, spilling out faster now. A dam breaking. I thought crypto was bouncing back. I borrowed from the wrong people, Dad. Private lenders. They said it was a bridge loan, but the market crashed again, and the interest, it compounded weekly. They were going to take the house. They were going to take everything. Vanessa found out last week. I leaned forward. The mention of his wife sharpened my focus. Vanessa. The woman who wouldn't let me wear my shoes in her foyer. The woman who asked me if my pension adjusted for inflation at Christmas dinner. What does Vanessa have to do with this? I asked Brandon, looked down at his hands, his one shoeless foot curling into the carpet. She brokered the deal. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Explain, I said. She knows people, Brandon said quietly. She has clients in import-export real estate investors from overseas. She knew I was in trouble. She set up a meeting with the man from the warehouse. She told them we had a secure way to move product. She told them we had a ghost, I asked. Someone who is invisible, Brandon said, tears streaming down his face again. Someone nobody looks at, someone. The border patrol waves through because he looks like a grandfather on a Sunday drive. She pitched you, Dad. She sold the idea of you. I sat back, the leather of the chair, groaning. The betrayal wasn't just impulsive stupidity. It was a calculated marketing pitch. My daughter-in-law had packaged my age, my service record, and my vintage car as a logistics solution for a transnational crime syndicate. She hadn't just allowed it, she had designed it. And you agreed, I said. It wasn't a question. She said it was the only way to save our lifestyle. Brandon pleaded. She said you had lived a good life. She said you were tough, that even if you got caught, you would survive prison better than I would. She said, you would do it for me because you always bail me out. I looked at my son. A 35-year-old man who was essentially a hollow shell filled with greed and fear. He wasn't evil, he was worse, he was weak. He was a parasite that had finally decided to consume the host. You are right about one thing, I said, standing up and tucking the gun into my waistband. I am tough, and I am going to survive this. I walked over to him and grabbed him by the lapels of his ruined jacket, hauling him to his feet. He flinched, expecting another hit. Listen to me. I hissed, my face inches from his. You are going to do exactly what I say from this moment forward. You are not going to call Vanessa. You are not going to call the police. You are going to be a soldier for the first time in your pathetic life, because we are currently occupying a forward operating base, and the enemy is regrouping. Do you understand? Yes, Dad, yes. I understand, he blubbered. Good. I released him, and he fell back onto the sofa. Now tell me about the drop. Where were the chips supposed to go? The rail yard, he said. Warehouse 4, but that changed. The guy on the phone, he said the deal is off, unless I bring the car to him now. He wants the car, and he wants me. He said, if I don't show up in an hour, he is going to send a cleanup crew to your house. He said no, witnesses. I checked my watch. We had burned 30 minutes with the police and this interrogation. We had maybe 20 minutes before they realized we weren't coming to the rail yard on their terms, before they decided to cut their losses and burn the house down with us inside. The rail yard is a kill box, I said, thinking aloud. They want us there to execute us and take the car. They aren't planning to negotiate debt anymore. Brandon, you compromised their operation. They are cleaning house. What do we do? Brandon asked, his voice small, terrified. I walked to the window and peered through the blinds. The street was still empty, but I could feel the eyes on the house. The spotters were out there. We go on the offensive, I said, turning back to him. We give them exactly what they want, but not how they expect it. I looked at the car keys on the counter. The Mustang was compromised. The house was compromised. My life was compromised. There was only one way out. We had to finish the delivery. Get up, I ordered. We are going to the garage, but Dad, the chips are gone. You said you moved them. I lied, I said. Walking toward the kitchen door, I didn't move them, I secured them, and now we are going to use them as bait. You wanted to be a big shot. Brandon, you wanted to play with the heavy hitters. Well, tonight, you get your wish. You are driving me. Brandon squeaked, driving. Where to the rail yard, I said, checking the load in my pistol, but we aren't going to warehouse 4. We are going to make a new arrangement. And you are going to pray that your old man still knows how to set an ambush, because if I miss, we both die in that parking lot. I opened the door to the garage, the smell of oil and gasoline hitting us. The Mustang sat there, polished and ready, a beautiful machine loaded with a deadly cargo. Get in the driver's seat, I said. Brandon hesitated, looking at the car like it was a coffin, Dad. I can't get in, I roared, my voice echoing off the concrete walls. He scrambled into the driver's seat, fumbling with the keys. I walked to the passenger side and opened the door. I looked at him, his hands shaking on the steering wheel. Drive, I said. And do not hit the brakes until I tell you. We have a delivery to make. As the garage door rolled up, revealing the dark night, I knew this was the point of no return. We were leaving the fortress. We were entering the open field, and in the open field, the only thing that matters is speed and violence of action. I pulled my phone out and dialed a number, not the police, not Vanessa. I dialed Clyde. It was time to call in the cavalry. The engine of the Mustang rumbled beneath us, a deep vibration that shook the tools hanging on the garage walls. Brandon's hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked. His knuckles were white bone pressing against skin. He looked like a man waiting for the executioner to pull the lever. Wait! Brandon said suddenly, stomping on the brake, before we had even cleared the threshold of the garage door. The car lurched to a halt, the tires chirping on the concrete. What are you doing? I asked, keeping my voice level though. My hand instinctively went to the pistol in my waistband. We are on a clock. Brandon, move! No, Dad, wait! Brandon turned to me, his eyes wide and frantic, darting to the rearview mirror, then to the door panels, then to the trunk. He was hyperventilating, gasping for air, like the garage was running out of oxygen. I need the keys are in the ignition, I said slowly, losing patience. You are driving, no! The keys to the trunk. Brandon snapped, his voice cracking with panic. I need to check the bag. You threw that duffel bag in the trunk. I need to see it. I need to make sure the vacuum seal's held. If we show up and the chips are damaged, if the count is off, they will kill us right there in the parking lot. Dad, these people do not negotiate with damaged goods. I need to see them. He reached for the ignition, trying to kill the engine so he could take the keys and open the trunk. I reached over and grabbed his wrist. My grip was iron-forged from 30 years of hauling crates and turning wrenches. He yelped, trying to pull away, but I held him fast. Do not touch that key, I said. Dad, let go. I have to check the merchandise. There is no merchandise, Brandon. I said, the words landing like stones in a pond. He froze. He stopped struggling and looked at me, his face contorted, in confusion. What the trunk? I said, releasing his wrist, but keeping my eyes locked on his, the bag in the trunk. It is full of old newspapers and 3 paving stones from the garden path. It weighs about 40 pounds, give or take. It looks right. It feels right. But it is garbage. Brandon stared at me, his mouth opening and closing without sound. It was as if his brain had simply ceased to function, unable to process the data I had just fed him. But the doors, he whispered, pointing a trembling finger at the driver. Side panel, the door panels, you said you hid them. You said you secured them. Did secure them, I said coldly, but they are not in the doors. Brandon, they are not in the car. This vehicle is empty. It is a clean ride. If the police pull us over right now, we are just 2 men going for a drive. The only thing illegal in this car is the unregistered firearm in my pants and the felon sitting in the driver's seat. Brandon let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. He slammed his hands against the steering wheel, his head falling back against the headrest. We are dead, he moaned, staring up at the roof of the car. We are dead, Dad. We are walking into a meeting with the cartel, and we have nothing. We are empty-handed. They are going to skin us alive. Why would you do that? Why would you bring a fake bag? Because I am not an idiot, I snapped. My voice filled the small cabin, sharp and authoritative. I am not a panicked real estate broker playing gangster. I am a logistics expert. And the first rule of a high-risk exchange is, you never bring the asset to the kill zone until you control the ground. You think I was going to let you drive $3 million of contraband into a rail yard surrounded by armed men? I continued, shaking my head. If we show up with the chips, they kill us and take the car. That is the math, Brandon. That is the only way this equation ends. They have no reason to let us live once they have the product. But if we show up empty, if I am the only person on Earth who knows where those chips are buried, then I have value. I am not a liability. I am the map, and you do not burn the map until you find the treasure. Brandon looked at me, and I saw the dawn of realization mixed with horror. He realized that I was playing a game of chicken with men who killed for a living, and I was using him as a passenger. "Where are they?" he whispered. "Where are the chips?" "Dad." I leaned back in the seat, checking the side mirror. The street was dark. The enemy was out there waiting. "I took them out hours ago," I said. Lying smoothly, I found the rattle in the door panel right after I sent the tracker to Canada. You think I didn't know the difference in weight distribution? You think I couldn't hear the slight dampening of the acoustics in the door frame? I stripped this car while you were panicking in your office. I put the chips somewhere safe, somewhere nobody will look, somewhere that requires a key only I have. Where Brandon demanded, his voice rising. "Give them to me, we can go get them, we can just give them what they want, and this will be over." "It will never be over if you give them what they want," I said harshly. "You give a blackmailer what he wants. He comes back for more. You give a killer what he wants. He leaves no witnesses. We are going to the rail yard. We are going to show them the car. We are going to prove we have the capability to deliver. And then we are going to dictate the terms." "I am not going," Brandon said, shaking his head, tears streaming down his face again. I can't do it. Dad. They will shoot me the second I step out of the car, then drive," I ordered. I pulled the slide of the 1911 back just an inch, checking the brass cartridge in the chamber. The sound was a metallic click that seemed deafening in the garage. "You have two choices, son," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "You can drive this car and trust that your father knows how to handle a tactical extraction. Or you can stay here and explain to the men who are watching this house why the Mustang never left the garage, and I promise you, they are not going to be as patient as I am." Brandon looked at the garage door, then at me. He wiped his face with his sleeve, sniffing loudly. He looked like a child again, a scared kid who had climbed too high in a tree and couldn't get down. "Where did you hide them, Dad?" he asked one last time, a desperate plea for control. "Drive," I said. He put the car in reverse. His foot trembled on the gas pedal. The Mustang lurched backward, clearing the garage. The night air rushed in, cold and biting. I hit the button on the visor, and the garage door rumbled down, sealing my home, sealing my secrets. We were out in the open now. The streetlights reflected off the hood of the car. Brandon turned the wheel, heading toward the main road, toward Jefferson Avenue, toward the steel mill. I kept my hand near the gun, my eyes scanning the mirrors. The dummy bag in the trunk thumped softly against the wheel well. A heavy, useless decoy. I had lied to him again. The chips weren't buried in some remote location. They were right there in the garage, hidden in the false bottom of my tool chest, not 10 feet from where we had been standing. If he knew that he would have turned the car around, he would have tried to trade them, and he would have died. Ignorance was his armor, and I was the shield. "Keep it steady," I said as we merged onto the avenue. "We have a delivery to make." But as we drove into the darkness of Detroit, I knew the delivery was just the opening move. The real game was about to begin. And I was betting everything on the fact that Clyde was driving fast and that the bad guys were listening to the wrong frequency. The silence of the house was broken not by a battering ram, but by the polite, insistent chime of the doorbell. It was a sound that seemed absurd given the violence of the last hour. I checked the monitors. The black Suburban was gone, replaced by a silver Mercedes sedan, parked arrogantly in the center of my driveway, blocking the exit. It was Vanessa's car. I checked the feed, too. People stood on the porch. One was Vanessa, looking impeccable in a trench coat and heels, her hair pulled back in a severe bun that screamed control. The other was a man I did not recognize. A suit, cheap fabric, expensive haircut, holding a leather briefcase like a shield. He had the soft, doughy look of a man who fought his battles with paperwork and perjury. I unlocked the front door and opened it. I did not have the gun in my hand, but it was tucked into the back of my belt, hidden beneath my untucked work shirt. I stood in the doorway, blocking their path. "Garrison," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with a synthetic concern that made my skin crawl. "Thank God you are all right. We were so worried," when Brandon stopped answering his phone. "We thought the worst." "Cut the act, Vanessa," I said, my voice gravel and ash. "I know what you did. I know about the deal. I know about the chips. You are not here to check on my health. You are here to check on your investment." Vanessa's face hardened. The mask of the worried daughter-in-law slipped, revealing the cold calculator underneath. She stepped forward, forcing me to step back or be touched, and she knew I would not let her touch me. She walked into the foyer, her heels clicking on the hardwood, like the tapping of a telegraph key. The lawyer followed her, closing the door behind him. "This is Mr. Sterling," Vanessa said, gesturing to the suit. "He is our family attorney. We need to have a conversation." "Garrison." "A difficult one." I looked at Sterling. He offered a thin, oily smile, reaching into his briefcase. "Mr. Ford," he said, his voice smooth and practiced, "we are here to execute an emergency guardianship order. Due to your recent erratic behavior, disappearing without notice, threatening your son, possessing firearms in an unstable mental state, the court has granted temporary conservatorship to your daughter-in-law." He pulled a document from the bag, stamped and signed. It looked official. It probably was official. Judges can be bought or manipulated, especially when the story is told by a crying woman in a designer suit. "This document grants Mrs. Ford full power of attorney over your assets, your medical decisions, and your property." Sterling continued handing me the paper. "Effective immediately. You are to surrender the keys to the vehicle, the keys to the house, and the combination to any safes on the premises. We are here to secure the environment for your own safety." I looked at the paper. It was a death warrant signed in black ink. It declared me incompetent. It stripped me of my rights. It turned me into a child in the eyes of the law, and the goal was obvious. They did not want to put me in a home. They wanted legal access to the garage. They wanted to find the chips legally and sell them without me being able to stop them. Vanessa was looking around the hallway, her eyes hungry. "Where is the car, Garrison? Where is the Mustang?" "The car is safe," I said, dropping the paper on the floor. I did not read it. I did not need to, Mr. Sterling. "Step aside," I said. Sterling blinked confused. "Excuse me, Mr. Ford. You need to comply or we will be forced to call the authorities to assist in the transfer," I said. "Step aside." I walked past him to the living room table where my cell phone sat. I picked it up and pressed a single speed dial number I had programmed years ago. "Blackwood," I said into the phone. "They are here." I put the phone on speaker and set it down on the table. A voice boomed from the tiny speaker, rich baritone, and filled with the kind of authority that makes courtrooms go silent. "Mr. Sterling, is it?" the voice asked. Sterling froze. He looked at the phone, then at me. "Who is this?" "This is Marcus Blackwood," the voice said, "senior partner at Blackwood, Hale and Associates. I suggest you look at the signature on the bottom of the document." "You just served my client." Sterling scrambled to pick up the paper from the floor. He squinted at the bottom page. "That is Judge Holloway." "Signature," Sterling said. "And who is the witness?" Blackwood asked Sterling. Turned the page, his face went pale. The color drained out of him like someone had pulled a plug. "It says here," Sterling stammered. "It says the witness was you." Correct, Blackwood said. I had lunch with Judge Holloway 40 minutes ago. We reviewed the petition that your client filed this morning, the one claiming Mr. Ford was senile and wandering. We compared it to the affidavit I filed an hour prior. An affidavit accompanied by a time-stamped video of Mr. Ford passing a mental competency exam with a perfect score just yesterday, alongside a statement from his primary physician. I smiled grimly. I hadn't taken an exam yesterday. Blackwood was bluffing, or he had called in a favor that cost more than my house, but that was Blackwood. He was a shark that ate other sharks. Furthermore, Blackwood continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. My client, Mr. Garrison Ford, is not just a retiree. He is the majority shareholder and silent owner of Aegis Private Security, the firm that provides the patrols for this very neighborhood, the firm that currently has 2 patrol cars idling at the end of the block waiting for my signal. Vanessa's eyes went wide. Aegis, she knew the name. It was the premier security firm in Detroit, high-end, tactical, expensive. She thought I was a pensioner scraping by on government checks. She didn't know I had invested my logistics consulting fees into the private sector 20 years ago. She didn't know. I owned the people she thought would arrest me, Mr. Sterling, Blackwood said. You have exactly 30 seconds to vacate my client's property before I have you arrested for filing a fraudulent legal instrument and attempted extortion. I will have your license before the Bar Association. By morning, Sterling looked at Vanessa. He looked at the door. He looked at me. The greed in his eyes was replaced by self-preservation. He dropped the briefcase, snapped it shut, and backed away. I did not know. He stammered. Vanessa, she told me he was confused. She said he was a danger. Get out, I said softly. Sterling turned and fled the front door, slamming behind him. Vanessa stood alone in the hallway, stripped of her legal armor, stripped of her muscle. She looked small suddenly. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a cornered feral panic. You lied to us, she whispered. You have money, you have a company, and you let us struggle. You let Brandon drown in debt while you sat on a fortune. I did not let him drown, I said, walking toward her. I taught him to swim. He chose to grab an anchor instead. Where are the chips? Garrison, she hissed, her hands balling into fists. I know you have them, I know. Brandon didn't deliver them. The cartel is calling me. They say if they don't get the merchandise in an hour, they are going to burn this whole block down. Give me the keys. I can fix this. I can still make the deal. You still don't get it, do you? I asked, shaking my head. You think this is a business transaction. You think you can negotiate with tigers. You sold my son to killers. Vanessa, you put a price tag on my life. I did what I had to do, she screamed, stepping into my face, her perfume cloying and thick. We deserve that money. We deserve a life. You are old. You are done. You are just taking up space. I looked at her, this woman who had shared my table, who had slept under my roof, and I saw nothing but a void, a black hole of entitlement that had swallowed my son. Hole, get out of my house, I said. She laughed, a brittle, hysterical sound. You can't kick me out. I am family. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the remote for the security system. I pressed a button, and the house chimed a soft, melodic tone that signaled the perimeter was resetting. The police are coming. Vanessa, I said, Blackwood already sent the file over. Not about the guardianship, about the fraud, about the forged signatures on Brandon E.S. loan documents, about the conspiracy to traffic restricted technology. I gave them everything, the texts, the emails, the recordings of you, setting up the meet. Her face went slack. Recorded me, I record everything I said. I am in logistics. Tracking is what I do. Sirens wailed in the distance, real ones this time, closing fast. You have 2 choices, I said. You can stay here and explain to the feds why you were trying to sell missile chips to foreign nationals, or you can run. But if you run, you leave now, and you never come back. You never speak to Brandon again. You never say my name. She looked at the door, then at me. She looked at the life she thought she was stealing, crumbling into dust. "I hope they kill you." She spat venom in her eyes. "I hope they burn this house to the ground with you in it." Then she turned and ran, her heels clacking on the floor, fleeing toward her Mercedes. I watched her go, feeling a strange hollowness in my chest. I had won the legal battle. I had exposed the rot in my family. But the night wasn't over. The cartel was still out there. The chips were still in my garage, and my son was sitting in the car waiting for me to save him or bury him. I picked up the phone again. "Blackwood," I said. "I am here, Garrison." "Are you secure?" "Vanessa is gone," I said. "The legal threat is neutralized. But I have to go out. I have to finish this. Do not do it, Garrison." Blackwood said, his voice losing its courtroom polish, turning into the voice of an old friend. "Let the cops handle the cartel. I can't." I said, "Brandon is with me. If the cops take the cartel, they take him too. I have to clear the board. Garrison, I need you to stay on the line with the precinct. Keep them away from the rail yard for 1 hour. Buy me time." There was a long pause. "1 hour," Blackwood said. "Then I give them everything." "Thank you, Marcus." I hung up. The foyer was silent again, empty of lawyers and traitors. I walked back to the garage. My hand brushed the grip of the 1911. The legal war was over. Now it was time for the kinetic one. I had cleared the rear guard. Now I had to face the front line. I opened the door to the garage. Brandon was sitting in the driver's seat of the Mustang, pale and shaking, staring straight ahead. "It is just us now, son," I said, sliding into the passenger seat. "Just you and me. Let us go for a ride." The phone on the center console lit up, washing the dark interior of the Mustang in a harsh artificial blue glow. It was the number again, the digital ghost. I did not pick it up immediately. I let it buzz, vibrating against the leather like an angry hornet. Brandon glanced at it, his eyes wide and terrified, reflecting the streetlights that flashed by as we sped down Jefferson Avenue. "Answer it," I said, my voice cutting through the hum of the engine. "Put it on speaker. Do not stutter, do not beg, just tell them we are 5 minutes out." Brandon swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He reached out with a shaking hand and tapped the screen. "Yeah," he said. His voice cracking. "Where are you?" The synthesized voice filled the car, cold and impatient. "We are at the rail yard. We do not see you." "We are coming," Brandon said, gripping the steering wheel so hard, his knuckles looked like they were about to burst through the skin. "We are on Jefferson." 5 minutes, just wait. You have 3 minutes, the voice said. "If I do not see headlights in 3 minutes, I start cutting fingers off your debt." The line went dead. I picked up the phone and checked the signal. We were close. The steel mill was a looming skeleton against the night sky, a jagged silhouette of rust and industry. It was the perfect place for an execution, isolated, dark, and full of noise to mask a gunshot. I needed a diversion. I needed them looking the wrong way when we rolled up. I scrolled through my contacts and found Clyde. He picked up on the first ring, the background noise of a diner filtering through. "I am at the Tim Hortons on Wyandotte," Clyde said, munching on something. "Good coffee, bad donuts. What is the play?" "Garrison, the package," I said. "How close are you to the local precinct?" 2 blocks, Clyde said. "I can see the lights from here." "Why, I need you to make a donation," I said. "I need you to take that little black box off your truck and stick it on a cruiser. Preferably one that looks like it is about to go on patrol," Clyde chuckled, a low rumble that sounded like a diesel engine idling. "You want me to bug the cops, Garrison?" "You are trying to get me deported. I am trying to save my life, Clyde," I said. "The bad guys are watching that signal right now. They think I am in Detroit, but they are confused. If that signal walks into a police station or starts riding shotgun with a Mountie, they are going to think this is an international sting operation. They are going to think the RCMP and the FBI are coordinating. They will panic, and panicked men make mistakes." Clyde finished the thought. I like it. Consider it done. Give me 2 minutes. I hung up and looked at Brandon. He was staring at me as if I had just grown a second head. What are you doing? He whispered. Why did you do that? I am creating chaos, I said, checking the magazine of my 1911 one last time. These men are professionals, Brandon. They work on intel. They work on certainty. Right now they are certain that they have us cornered. But in 2 minutes, they are going to see their tracking beacon, the one they attached to this car, move directly into a Canadian police station. They will think you are a rat, Brandon said, realizing the implication. I corrected him. They will think you are a rat. They will think you set them up. They will think this whole thing, the debt, the car, the delay was a federal entrapment scheme. Brandon's face went white. They will kill me. They were going to kill you anyway, I said. My voice hard, but now they will hesitate. They will wonder if there is a sniper team on the roof. They will wonder if the warehouse is bugged. They will be looking at the shadows, not at us, and that hesitation is the only thing that is going to keep us alive. I pointed ahead, where the rusted gates of the steel mill loomed. Turn off the headlights. What? Brandon asked. Kill the lights, I ordered. Now we go in dark. He flipped the switch, and the world plunged into shadow. The Mustang became a shark swimming in black water. We rolled through the open gates, the tires crunching softly on gravel and broken glass. I scanned the yard, my eyes adjusted to the gloom, picking out the shapes of shipping containers and piles of scrap metal. There, I whispered, pointing to the main loading dock. A single floodlight illuminated the concrete platform. Underneath it stood the black Suburban, 2 men leaning against the hood smoking cigarettes. They looked relaxed, confident. The confidence of men who thought they had already won parked behind that container stack. I told Brandon, do not turn the engine off. Keep your foot on the brake. We slid into the shadows 50 yards from the dock, invisible to the men in the light. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Clyde, package delivered. Unit 42 is on the move. I smiled. It was a grim, humorless smile. Now we wait, I whispered. Wait for what? Brandon hissed. For the call, I said. 30 seconds later, the man leaning against the Suburban straightened up. He touched his earpiece. His body language shifted instantly from relaxed to rigid. He said something to the other man, who immediately threw his cigarette down and pulled a weapon from his jacket. They were checking their screens. They were seeing the tracker in Montreal moving at patrol speed right into the heart of the law enforcement district. The man with the earpiece pulled out his phone and dialed. My phone rang. I looked at Brandon. Answer it, put it on speaker. Brandon tapped the screen. Yeah, you set us up. The synthesized voice was gone, replaced by the raw shouting of the man on the dock. He was screaming over the phone, his voice echoing slightly in the yard. You rat, you brought the heat. I did not, Brandon stammered. I am here. I am right outside. The tracker is in a cop car in Montreal, the man screamed. We have a federal task force beacon on our screen. Is this a joke? Is this funny to you? It is not me, Brandon yelled, his voice rising in panic. It is my dad. He did it. Shut up, I hissed at him, slapping his arm. Listen to me, I said, leaning over the console, speaking into the phone loud enough for the man on the dock to hear me through the device and his earpiece. This is Garrison Ford. The tracker in Canada is a decoy. The car is here. The chips are here. If you want them, you will calm down and listen. You have 10 seconds to show yourself. Or we burn this whole place down, the man shouted, pulling a submachine gun from the back seat of the Suburban. We are coming out, I said. But if I see a muzzle flash, I drive this car into the river and you explain to your bosses why you lost $3 million in product. I hung up. I said to Brandon. He hesitated, his whole body shaking. Drive the car into the light, I said slowly. Now Brandon eased his foot off the brake. The Mustang crept forward, rolling out from behind the containers and into the harsh glare of the floodlight. We were exposed. We were vulnerable. And the enemy was terrified. Perfect, the Mustang, perfect, rolled forward, the tires crunching over the gravel and broken glass that littered the loading dock. The floodlight was blinding. A solid wall of white that washed out the world beyond the windshield. Brandon was hyperventilating beside me, his breath coming in short, jagged gasps that fogged up the side window. "Stop," I said, my voice low and steady. The car lurched to a halt 10 yards from the black Suburban. The two men standing by the hood were silhouettes against the glare, but I could see the weapons clearly. One held a submachine gun, compact and ugly. The other, the one who had been screaming on the phone, held a heavy pistol low by his thigh. They were not relaxed anymore. Their body language was coiled tight, vibrating, with the kind of nervous energy that usually precedes a massacre. "Kill the engine," I told Brandon. "Keep your hands on the wheel where they can see them. Do not move unless I say so." I opened the passenger door and stepped out into the light. The air smelled of rust off the river and impending violence. I raised my hands slowly, palms open, showing them I was unarmed. The wind cut through my flannel shirt. But I did not shiver. I planted my feet and looked directly at the man with the pistol, the one giving the orders. "We are here," I shouted, my voice echoing off the corrugated steel of the warehouse. "The car is here. The boy is here. Let us make the exchange." The leader stepped forward, stepping out of the shadow of the Suburban. He was younger than I expected, with the hollow eyes of a man who has seen too much and slept too little. He looked at me, then at the car, then at his phone, which was still clutched in his left hand. "Open the trunk," he barked, raising the pistol slightly. I walked to the rear of the Mustang, moving deliberately slow. Every movement was a calculation. If I moved too fast, they would shoot. If I moved too slow, they would get suspicious. I keyed the trunk lock and popped the lid. It rose with a pneumatic hiss, revealing the duffel bag I had stuffed with newspapers and paving stones. "Show me," the leader demanded. I grabbed the zipper and pulled it open just an inch, revealing the dark plastic of the vacuum seals inside. It looked real enough from 10 yards away under bad lighting. "It is all there," I said, stepping away. "Form the car, 3 million in guidance chips. Now let my son go." The leader laughed, a dry, barking sound that had no humor in it. He did not look at the bag. He looked at his phone again, his thumb scrolling frantically across the screen. "You think I am stupid? Old man," he sneered. "You think I do not know what is happening? My contact in Montreal just pinged me the tracker. The one on this car, it is not just in Canada. It is sitting inside the impound lot of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police headquarters." I kept my face like stone inside. I was grinning. "Clyde, you magnificent bastard. He hadn't just put it on a cruiser, he had gotten it all the way to the station." "That is impossible," I said, feigning confusion. "The car is right here. You are looking at it. Do not play games with me," the leader screamed, his composure cracking. "The signal is active. It is transmitting from inside a federal building. That means this car is a decoy, or that tracker is a federal beacon. You are not a mule. You are a setup." He raised the pistol, leveling it at my chest. The man with the submachine gun shifted his aim toward the windshield, toward Brandon. "You brought the feds down on us," the leader yelled, spit flying from his lips. "You are wearing a wire, aren't you? This whole thing is a sting operation." I saw the panic in his eyes. It was the panic of a criminal who realizes he is swimming in waters far too deep for him. He wasn't thinking about the chips anymore. He was thinking about life sentences and federal indictments. He was thinking about cleaning up the loose ends. "Kill them both," he shouted to his partner. "Burn the car. We leave now." The man with the submachine gun tightened his finger on the trigger. I did not reach for my gun. I did not dive for cover. I simply spoke one word clearly and loudly into the night air: Aegis. The reaction was instantaneous, from the darkness above the warehouse floor, from the shadows behind the shipping containers, and from the roof of the loading dock. High-intensity spotlights flared to life simultaneously. 6 beams of blinding light converged on the 2 men, pinning them against the black Suburban like insects under a magnifying glass. The sound of weapons racking echoed from every direction, a mechanical symphony of overwhelming force. "Drop them!" A voice boomed from a loudspeaker, amplified and commanding. It was Blackwood's voice, smooth even in combat mode. "Federal agents are en route. You are surrounded by private security contractors authorized to use lethal force. Drop the weapons or you will be neutralized." The man with the submachine gun spun around trying to find a target, but he was blinded by the lights, confused by the sudden shift in power. He raised the barrel instinctively toward the roof. "Do not do it," shouted at him. A single shot rang out sharp and precise. It wasn't from the criminals. It came from the darkness, a sniper round that struck the pavement inches from the gunman's boot, kicking up a spray of concrete dust. It was a warning shot, fired with surgical accuracy. "The next one goes center mass," the loudspeaker boomed. The leader looked at me, his eyes wide with shock. He looked at the lights, he looked at his partner, and he realized the math had changed. He wasn't fighting an old man and his son, he was fighting a paramilitary unit. He dropped the pistol. It clattered onto the concrete on the ground now. Both men fell to their knees. Hands interlaced behind their heads, defeated not by bullets, but by the sudden crushing reality that they had been outmaneuvered. I watched as figures emerged from the shadows, men in black tactical gear, moving with fluid, professional grace. They weren't police, they were my employees, the best operators from Aegis Security, the company I had built quietly over 20 years, the company. My family thought was just a boring consulting gig. They moved in zip, tying the criminals, clearing the weapons, securing the scene efficiently. 2 of them moved toward the Mustang, checking Brandon, pulling him out of the car and shielding him. I walked over to the leader who was now pressed, cheek first, into the gravel. "Who are you?" he wheezed, looking up at me with a mixture of fear and awe. "You are not a Fed." "No," I said, leaning down so only he could hear me. "I am a logistics expert, and you violated my supply chain." Blackwood walked out from the shadows wearing a Kevlar vest over his expensive suit. He looked out of place and perfectly at home at the same time. "Police are 3 minutes out." "Garrison," he said, checking his watch. "We need to clear the perimeter, the chips." I pointed to the garage back at the house. "They are in my tool chest. Secure them, hand them over to the FBI. Tell them we intercepted a smuggling operation. Tell them we are good citizens and the prisoners." "Sion," Blackwood asked, gesturing to the 2 men. "Leave them for the cops," I said loud enough for Brandon to hear. "They are going to need someone to blame, and I think these 2 will be very talkative once they realize the cartel isn't coming to bail them out." I turned to look at Brandon. He was standing by the car, shaking uncontrollably, staring at the tactical team, staring at Blackwood, staring at me. He looked like he was seeing his father for the first time. Not as the old man who needed help with his email, but as something else entirely, something terrifying. "Yeah," he whispered. "What is this? Who are these people?" I walked over to him. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. "These are my people, Brandon," I said, "my real people. The ones who don't sell me out for a quick buck, but you own this, you own Aegis." "I do," I said, "and I could have paid your debt." "Brandon, I could have written a check for $500,000 and not even felt it. I could have saved you." Weeks ago, Brandon's face crumbled. The realization hit him harder than a physical blow. He realized that his greed, his secrecy, his lies had cost him everything. If he had just come to me, if he had just been honest, I would have helped him, but he chose to steal, he chose to use me, and now he was standing in the wreckage of his choices. "Why didn't you tell me?" he cried. "Why? Because you didn't ask for help, son," I said sadly. "You tried to take it." Sirens wailed in the distance, closing fast. The cleanup was done. The stage was set. The criminals were packaged for the police, the contraband was secured, and the danger was neutralized. "Get in the car," I told Brandon. Where are we going? He asked, wiping his eyes. To the station, I said. The police are going to have questions, and you are going to answer them honestly for the first time in your life. I got into the driver's seat of the Mustang. The leather was still warm, the engine idled smoothly. A heartbeat that had survived the night. I looked at the rear view mirror at the lights of the rail yard fading behind us. I had won the war, but I had lost the peace. My son was safe, but he was broken. And as we drove toward the flashing lights of the approaching cruisers, I knew that the hardest part wasn't the gunfight. It was going to be the silence that came after. The interrogation room smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. The scent of bad decisions and long nights. I sat on one side of the metal table, my hands resting calmly on the cold surface unbound. The handcuffs were for criminals, and thanks to Blackwood and my portfolio of government contracts, I was currently classified as a cooperating witness. My son and his wife, however, were not so lucky. Across the table, Brandon and Vanessa were cuffed to the steel bar running along the floor. They looked like wrecks. Vanessa's expensive trench coat was ruined, stained with grease and dirt from the takedown at the rail yard. Her hair was coming loose from its severe bun, hanging in ragged strands around a face that was twisted with hate. Brandon just looked broken. He was staring at the two-way mirror, his eyes glassy, checking out of reality, because the reality was too heavy to bear. A detective entered the room carrying a clear evidence bag. He was a big man with tired eyes, the kind of cop who had seen everything twice. He tossed the bag onto the table with a heavy thud inside. It was not a stack of high-tech military processors. It was a pile of shattered ceramic tile, dirty and gray. "What is this?" Vanessa snapped, her voice shrill, cutting through the hum of the ventilation system. "Where is the merchandise?" The detective looked at her with a mixture of amusement and disgust. "That is what we found in the door panels of the Mustang, Mrs. Ford, and in the duffel bag in the trunk. It is bathroom tile. Looks like vintage subway tile, probably from the 50s. Heavy stuff." Vanessa's head snapped toward me, her eyes wide with confusion and rage. "You moved them," she hissed. "You moved the chips before you came to the warehouse. You hid them somewhere else to cut a deal for yourself. You old thief. You are trying to frame us." I leaned forward slightly, the metal chair scraping against the floor. The sound made Brandon flinch. "I did not hide them. Tonight." "Vanessa," I said, my voice calm, steady, the voice of a teacher correcting a slow student. "I did not move them when I found the tracker. I moved them 3 days ago." 3 days. Brandon whispered, finally looking at me. 3 days. "But I put the tracker on this morning." "Exactly," I said. "You put a tracker on a car that was already empty. You were tracking a ghost shipment." I reached into the inner pocket of my flannel shirt and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I smoothed it out on the table and slid it toward the detective. "This is a receipt from the Detroit FBI field office," I said. "It is dated 72 hours ago. It is a chain of custody form for $3 million worth of restricted guidance chips delivered by me personally to Special Agent Miller." The room went silent. The detective picked up the paper and scanned it, raising his eyebrows. "You turned it in?" he asked. I nodded. "I check my car every day, detective. Every single day. It is a 69 Mach 1. It is not just a car, it is a piece of history. I know every vibration, every rattle. When I took it out for a spin on Sunday, the door felt heavy. The suspension was listing a fraction of an inch on the left side." I pulled the panel and found the vacuum bags. Vanessa was shaking her head, muttering to herself, No, that is impossible." "You are lying. I knew someone was using my car as a drop." I continued, ignoring her. "I just did not know who. I did not want to tip them off, so I replaced the weight with tile to keep the suspension level. And I waited. I waited to see who would come for it." I looked at Brandon. His face was a mask of absolute horror. He was realizing that every moment of the last 12 hours, every panic attack, every threat, every mile driven, had been a farce. The chips were never in danger. The deal was dead before he even woke up this morning. When you came over this morning, Brandon, when you insisted on checking the brakes, I knew it was you. You were not checking for safety, you were checking your cargo, and when you planted that tracker, you sealed your fate, so the trip to Canada, the detective asked, suppressing a smile. Theater, I said. I needed to see how far they would go. I needed to see if they were just desperate or if they were dangerous. Sending the tracker away flushed them out. It made them panic. And when they panicked, they called their handlers. I looked at Vanessa. She was pale, the blood draining from her face as the walls closed in. You let us walk into a trap, she whispered. You let us negotiate with the cartel. You let them threaten to kill us, and you knew the whole time the chips were with the feds. I let you show me who you really are, I corrected her. You were willing to sell me out, Vanessa. You were willing to let me drive into federal prison or a maftuso. Shallow grave, just to pay off your debts. If I had just confronted you, you would have lied. You would have denied it. I needed you to commit. I needed you to pick up the phone and call the killers, and you did. The detective tapped the table, looking at Brandon. So let me get this straight. You leveraged your father's car to smuggle contraband, but the contraband was already in an FBI evidence locker, so you effectively hired a cartel to hijack a car full of bathroom tile. Brandon put his head on the table and began to sob. It was a pathetic sound, the sound of a man realizing he was not a player, he was the pawn. You are a monster, Vanessa screamed, lunging at me, the handcuffs catching her short, snapping her back into the chair. You set up your own son, you sent him to prison, he sent himself, I said, standing up. My knees popped. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me tired, bone deep tired. He had a choice, Vanessa. He could have come to me, he could have told me he was in trouble. I would have written a check. I would have sold the house, but he didn't. He chose the easy way. He chose the criminal way, and you pushed him. I turned to the detective. I am done here, I said. I assume you have everything you need. The recordings from my home security system, the audio from the car, the testimony of my security team. We have plenty. Mr. Ford, the detective said, standing up. The cartel guys are singing like birds. In the other room, they are very upset about the tile. They claim they were defrauded by these two fraud. Brandon moaned into the table. I looked at them one last time, my son and the woman who destroyed him. They looked small, petty. They did not look like family. They looked like strangers. I had read about in a newspaper. I walked to the door but stopped my hand on the knob. I looked back at Brandon. You asked me this morning if I missed the old days. When I was in the service, I said. Brandon lifted his head, his eyes red and swollen. I do. I said softly. In the service, I knew who the enemy was. The enemy didn't eat at my table. The enemy didn't call me Dad. I opened the door and walked out into the hallway, leaving them to the fluorescent lights and the consequences of their ambition. The air in the station was stale, but to me, it smelled like freedom. I had lost a son, but I had kept my integrity, and in the end, that was the only thing you could really take with you. The gavel hit the wood block with a sound that felt final, like a coffin lid slamming shut. Federal courtrooms do not have the drama of television. There were no gasps from the gallery, no tearful outbursts, just the dry rustle of paperwork and the drone of the judge reading the sentencing guidelines. 15 years for conspiracy to traffic restricted military technology. 15 years for racketeering, 10 years for fraud to be served concurrently. It was a life sentence in installments calculated by a formula that did not care about family dinners or missed birthdays. I sat in the back row, my hands folded in my lap, watching the backs of their heads. Brandon's shoulders were slumped, his posture collapsing under the weight of the reality that had just crushed him. Vanessa sat rigid, her spine straight, vibrating with a fury that had nowhere to go. The marshals moved in the moment the judge finished. They did not handle them gently. They were federal prisoners now, property of the Bureau of Prisons. I stood up as they were led away. Brandon turned to look at me, his eyes searching the room until they locked onto mine. He looked like a ghost, pale and hollowed out. He mouthed a word, but I did not catch it. The heavy oak doors swung shut, swallowing them into the system. I requested a final visitation before they were transferred to the holding facility. The marshals knew who I was, knew my role in the investigation, so they granted me 5 minutes in the secure room. It was a small concrete box divided by thick plexiglass. The air smelled of sanitizer and despair. Vanessa was brought in first. She did not sit down. She stood on the other side of the glass, her hands cuffed to her waist, her face stripped of makeup, revealing the hard lines of a woman who had gambled everything and lost. "You think you won," she hissed, her voice tinny through the speaker grill. "You think because you are on that side of the glass you are the winner. You are just a lonely old man, Garrison. You are going to die alone in that big house, and nobody is going to find you for weeks." I looked at her calmly. I did not feel anger anymore, just a profound disappointment, like looking at a machine that had broken down beyond repair. "I might die alone, Vanessa," I said, my voice steady, "but I will die free, and I will die with my name clean. You traded your freedom for a shortcut that did not exist. You underestimated me not because I am old, but because you think decency is a weakness. You thought I would lay down and let you walk over me because I loved my son. You forgot that I love my country and my self-respect just as much." She spat at the glass, a futile gesture of hate. The guard stepped forward and pulled her away. She was screaming something about the will, about the money. As they dragged her out, I watched her go, feeling nothing. She was a stranger to me now, just another threat I had neutralized. Then they brought Brandon. He sat down heavily, the chair scraping against the floor. He looked at the phone on the wall, then at me. He picked it up, his hand trembling. "Dad," he said, his voice broken, crying openly. "Now." "Dad, you have to help me," the lawyer said. "We can appeal," he said. "If we get a better firm, we can get the sentence reduced to 5 years. But it costs money, Dad. It costs a lot." He was still doing it. Even now, in handcuffs, facing a decade and a half in a cage, he was still asking me to open my wallet. He was still looking for the bailout. "I am not hiring a lawyer, Brandon," I said. "But the house," he pleaded. "Sell the house, Dad. You can liquidate the company. You have millions in assets. You can save me. You have to save me. I am your son." I looked at him. I looked at the boy I had raised. The man who had tried to sell me to a cartel. "I am not selling the house," I said. "I am renovating it. I am turning your old room into a gym, and the company is doing just fine without you." "Dad, please, you cannot leave me in here." "I am not leaving you, Brandon. You left me the moment you decided I was disposable. You left me when you put a tracker on my car and a price on my head. You made a choice, son. You chose easy money over hard work. You chose a predator over your father, and now you have to live with the rent." I stood up, placing the receiver back on the hook. "Dad, wait. Where are you going?" I leaned close to the glass, my breath fogging it slightly. "I taught you how to ride a bike, Brandon. I taught you how to fish. I taught you how to change a tire. But I failed to teach you how to be a man. I failed to teach you that actions have consequences, that you cannot buy your way out of character. So this is my final lesson. The next 15 years are your classroom. Sit in that cell and think about the man you could have been. And when you get out, if you are still alive, do not come looking for me. The locks have been changed." I turned my back on him, ignoring his screams, ignoring the way he pounded on the glass. I walked to the door and signaled the guard. I was done. The door buzzed open, and I stepped out into the hallway, leaving my son in the box he had built for himself. I walked out of the federal courthouse, and the sunlight hit me bright and cold. It was a crisp Detroit afternoon, the kind of day that makes you glad to be alive. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that did not smell of prison or betrayal. I felt lighter, the weight I had been carrying for weeks, the suspicion, the fear, the anger. It was gone. I had cut the anchor loose. I walked to the parking lot, where the Mustang sat, gleaming in the sun. It looked beautiful, aggressive, and timeless, a survivor just like me. I ran my hand over the hood, feeling the warmth of the metal, unlocked the door, and slid into the driver's seat. The leather creaked, a familiar welcoming sound. I took my phone out of my pocket and dialed a number. It rang twice, yellow. Clyde's voice rumbled over the line. "It is done, Clyde," I said. "They gone 15 years, federal." "Good riddance," Clyde grunted. "They were bad apples, Garrison. You did what you had to do. You okay?" "I am better than okay." I said, "I am free. Where are you?" "Courthouse parking lot." "Well, turn that key and get over here. I am at the VFW hall. The beer is cold and the game is on." "And Garrison?" "Yeah, Clyde. First round is on me. You saved my rig with that tracker stunt, least I can do." I smiled, a real smile this time, one that reached my eyes. "I am on my way." I turned the key, and the 302 V8 roared to life, a thunderous affirmation of power and freedom. I shifted into gear and pulled out of the lot, merging into traffic. I checked the rearview mirror one last time. The courthouse was receding in the distance, a gray stone monolith holding the past. I did not look back again. I looked forward through the windshield at the open road ahead. I had my car, I had my friends, and I had my integrity. The rest was just noise, and I had tuned it out for good. The old man was going to get a beer, and he had earned it. The hardest lesson I learned wasn't about logistics or survival. It was about family. We grow up believing that blood is a binding contract, that we must protect our own no matter the cost. But I learned that true family is defined by loyalty and respect, not DNA. By saving my son from his consequences for years, I didn't help him. I crippled him. I let him believe he could trade my life for his comfort. Sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is let their child fall. I lost my son, but I kept my integrity, and that is the only thing you can take with you when you go. If you enjoyed this story of justice, please hit the like button and subscribe for more life stories. And tell me in the comments, would you have turned your own son in or would you have tried to save him? I'll be reading your answers.